Brown. Boy, I'm AJ Browned out, number one, BLG. So I'll ask you if you're AJ Browned out. And if it's true, and the Eagles and the Cowboys sent a 1, a 2, and a player for AJ Brown. If that's the case, he's back. Can we stop talking about it? Because that offer's not coming. Where are you with the AJ States and the latest news there?
I mean, I've never thought the Eagles just want to give him up. That's never been the case. The case is that the big question is, does AJ want to be here?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And that's extremely relevant. And you can just say, well, keep him anyway. I mean, okay, but you saw it last year. Like, you didn't really get the real full version of AJ Brown all season with him looking so disinterested. So, like, that's tough for me to just be like, oh, they're not going to move him if they don't get a big deal. I mean, I think that's obviously the stance that the Eagles and Howie Roseman have to maintain to try to maintain as much leverage as they can to try to get that offer. But I don't think it's just as simple as that. It's not like, hey, oh, we didn't get this, then it's an easy decision. I don't think it's that easy of a decision for the team.
Yeah, I've been saying for like 2 weeks now. I love the Mike Tomlin quote. I probably said it to you. It's
Hmm.
you don't want hostages. You want volunteers. Like I'm with you. I'm like, great. You don't want to give him butt. You can be stubborn, but if he doesn't want to be here, and you're going to get a lack of focus and frustration, is that worth it? It's a difficult decision. I acknowledge that, but I think it's about. I've always thought it's more about AJ wanting to be here rather than the Eagles getting proper value for AJ Brown. Um, is that your kind of take on it?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the big factor is the willingness there. Again, we saw what it looked like last year. It wasn't pretty. Maybe things are different, but I have a hard time believing that. Do I really believe? I have to see it to believe that things are really going to be different this year on his end.
BLJ, 1 week from free agency, you got the big four basically in Philly with Reed, N'Kobe, Jalen Phillips, and why am I blanking right now on the freaking fourth name? Reed,
Got it?
N'Kobe, yeah, and Dallas Goddard. Duh. How many of them do you think return to Philly? What's your early indication right now as we get ready for that legal negotiating period to kick off on Monday?
Yeah, I think it could really depend on. I think Jalen Phillips, that's really the first domino that might have to fall, or at least the Eagles ideally would like that to be the one. Because let's say Jalen Phillips ends up signing elsewhere to a number that the Eagles don't feel comfortable reaching. Well, maybe at that point, then you could bring back like Dallas Goddard and Reed Blankenship. But if you bring back Jalen Phillips, that's probably your one move. So it could really depend on, I think, Phillips and what he gets. I tend to think the Eagles are going to make a good effort to try to bring him back. I think they want to do that ideally, but also again aren't just going to hand him a blank check. There's certainly a walkaway number that they'll have for Jalen Phillips, but I do think that is the priority going into free agency.
Certainly is more questions, I think, around the Eagles coming into this new league year than probably since, the 2022 off season in between 21 and 22. There is more uncertainty, not only with the free agents, the in-house guys, but having to fill some holes and also extensions. You got options coming up for Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith. You got potential extensions for Carter, for um, Jordan Davis. Certainly, Nolan Smith is probably going to have to wait. What is there too many moving parts for this to be just one of those special years that we saw in 2022 and 2024?
There's certainly a lot to figure out, and the Eagles are in a position of privilege in the terms that when they've assembled so much talent on the roster that they have, you're not in that phase they were in like 2021 and 2022 where you're building it up and you get to like sign players and trade for players, and you have more money to spend. They're in a position where they've already spent so much money and they already have so much talent that you're in the stage of losing those kind of players, and that comes with the territory of the success that they've had. It's not fun, to admit, but it's the cost of kind of doing business and being as successful as they've been here. So, I think it's kind of like they have probably one big splash in them, whether that's Jalen Phillips, whether that's a trade, we'll see, and maybe two if you want to count the AJ Brown situation in there. But a lot of it's probably going to be like of the ilk of last year, where you signed Josh Uche and you're trying to see if you have anything there, or these kind of lower level kind of deals that you're making. And look, I mean, I think that's where some of the best GMing has to take place. When you have limited resources and you're trying to make the most of that, and turn find good complementary pieces to add to the roster that you have.
It's going to be interesting to see what they end up doing here, Bill G. A lot left up in the air, Bill G. I was saying this. You tell me if you think I'm overstating it. If Dallas Goedert leaves, and if ultimately AJ gets traded, I don't think they're going to trade him, but I understand the complexity of it. If those guys both go, it's going to be hard for me, BLG, to think of this team as a legit Super Bowl contender. There's probably 5 or 6 every year that are legitimate, and I think the Eagles have been built well enough in the last 4 years to legitimately be in that conversation for 4 years, and obviously went to 2 of them. If those guys are gone and you're replacing them with rookies or lesser players, it's going to be hard for me to believe they're a Super Bowl contender. Do you think I'm overstating it, or how do you see it if those guys depart?
Yeah, I definitely think it's hard to just assume year to year, that things stay the same. And I'm not saying the Eagles are, going to be like the Commanders last year, but sometimes things feel, and this kind of works both ways. Sometimes things feel further than they are, for both good and bad, in terms of if you're in a hole sometimes in the NFL, it can feel like, oh, we're so far away from being competitors. And maybe not, because you make the right moves and success can happen a lot sooner. Obviously, just the other way. You can think, oh, we're there, going to be good, and then all of a sudden you're not, and you fall off a lot quicker than you thought. So, I think that always looms large there, just the volatility that we see in the NFL. I don't think you can just assume that just because the Eagles have been one of the most talented teams in the league over the past so many seasons here, that it's definitely going to be the case. Because for as much as they might make moves and everything, it's an arms race, and the other teams are making good moves too, and you can't just assume that all the other teams are going to stay in status there. So I think the Eagles, again, they have potential here to have a good offseason, make good moves that point them in the right direction, but it could go the other way because there's a lot of questions to answer.
When we talk about adding personnel, BLG, we usually talk about free agency and the draft first, but there is the trade market. How active do you think Howie will be? And I'm not just talking about AJ leaving, but potentially acquiring guys. How active do you think he'll use that avenue in this offseason?
Yeah, I think fairly active, and not just because he likes to make trades, as history tells us, but also because when we're talking about the lack of spending they're kind of able to do in free agency, and especially if they kind of want to play the comp pick formula game there, and not sign so many players. And the way to get some cheaper players on rookie deals, is to make trades and to not have to lean into free agency there. So I do think there's going to be opportunities, and also just AJ Brown aside, some of these other players they have on their roster, there's opportunities to I think make moves with what they have, and also try to bring in some cheaper contributors through trade.
BLG, a lot's going to change for the draft process next week with free agency. I'm going to hit you with your guys' question of the day you had yesterday. Can you see the Eagles drafting a tight end in the first round of the NFL draft?
Mm-hmm. I think if Kenyon Sadiq makes it to their pick, which, looking maybe less likely after his combine performance, I think it depends who else is on the board. Obviously, it's always the caveat. If there's an offensive tackle that they really like, obviously they're going to go tackle. But if Sadiq is there, and then you're looking at, some other positions that aren't necessarily tackles, it's high quality positions, then yeah, I think it's possible. I think unlikely just because they haven't really valued tight end in that kind of way. I think Howie Roseman, his track record tells us he thinks he can get one later on than the first round. But there are exceptions to every rule, and I do think if the right circumstance lines up, could happen, and should happen from a standpoint of, hey, they have nothing at tight end, But I also don't think they're just going to go into the draft by that point thinking like, okay, here's where we're going to get our answer. And they shouldn't, because they need to have done more homework to that point.
No, well, everything changes. But where are you? Interesting. Just for my own personal edification, like I think everybody looks at off-ball linebacker and say, see how we drafted an off-ball linebacker last year.